Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 31 years old, and for a long time, I thought I was in a relationship that was slowly moving towards something serious. Not rushed, not forced, just steady. The kind of relationship where you don't question things every day because everything feels normal. Mason and I had been together for almost 2 years, and while we weren't married, we lived like we were. Same apartment, shared routines, shared bills, shared responsibilities. From the outside, it looked stable, and for a while, I believed it was. If I'm being honest, Mason wasn't difficult in obvious ways. We didn't fight constantly. We didn't have screaming matches. He wasn't openly cruel in a way that would make other people immediately step in and say something was wrong. That was what made it harder to name. The problems weren't loud. They were small, repeated, and easy to overlook until they started stacking on top of each other. At some point, things shifted, but not in a way I could point to right away. It was more about how he started speaking. The tone changed before the behavior did. Conversations that used to feel mutual started feeling one-sided. Decisions became his, not ours. And when I questioned anything, even casually, the response was always the same. Dismissive, but calm enough that it never quite turned into a full argument. That kind of dismissal is dangerous. Not because it explodes, because it makes you feel unreasonable for even noticing it. The night everything changed started like any other. We were out with a group of people, mostly his friends, though by then I knew them well enough that it didn't feel unfamiliar. It was one of those casual gatherings where everybody talks over each other, glasses knock lightly against tabletops, and someone is always halfway through a story nobody asked for, but everyone pretends to care about anyway. Nothing serious. Nothing that should have stood out. At some point, the conversation shifted toward weekend plans. Someone asked Mason what he was doing, and he mentioned that he might be going out of town. That was the first time I heard about it. I turned toward him and said, "You're going somewhere?" I wasn't accusing him. I wasn't trying to start anything. I was genuinely surprised. He didn't even look at me when he answered. "Yeah, probably." There was something in the way he said it, casual but closed, that made my chest tighten a little. "With who?" I asked. That was when he finally turned. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't playful either. It was light, almost amused, like I had wandered into a conversation I wasn't supposed to be part of. And then he said it. "Stop acting like we're married." The table went quiet for half a second. Then someone laughed. Then another person joined in. And just like that, the moment became a joke everyone felt invited into. "You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with," he added. More laughter. I remember the exact way the sound hit me. Not loud, not dramatic, just sharp enough to make everything around me feel thinner. The room was still bright. People were still smiling. Somebody reached for fries in the middle of the table. A server walked past carrying drinks. Life kept moving with that awful normal rhythm it has when something humiliating happens in public and nobody wants to be the one to admit it wasn't funny. I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because something inside me went very still. From the outside, it probably looked like I let it go, like I wasn't bothered, like I knew he was joking and decided to be cool about it. That wasn't what happened. What happened was quieter than that. Clearer too. Because sometimes, when someone shows you exactly how they see you, the smartest thing you can do is stop arguing with the evidence. The rest of the night continued like nothing had happened. Conversations picked back up. Someone changed the subject. A couple of people were still smiling into their glasses like they'd just witnessed a harmless little moment between two people who knew how to tease each other. But I knew better, because it wasn't only what he said, it was how easily he said it. No hesitation, no glance at me afterward to check if I was okay, no private squeeze of my hand under the table to say, I went too far. Nothing. And that was the part I couldn't stop replaying. On the way home, he didn't bring it up, not once. No apology, no explanation, not even a lazy, half-hearted, "You know I was kidding." He just acted like the evening had gone perfectly fine, like I was supposed to carry the embarrassment, and he was allowed to keep the comfort. Streetlights moved across the windshield in soft bands of gold as we drove. I watched them slide over his face and disappear. His hand rested easy on the steering wheel. He even hummed once under his breath, like he didn't have a single unfinished thing behind him. I looked out the window and realized I was done reaching for reassurance that he had no interest in giving. The next morning, he mentioned the trip again, this time more casually, like he was confirming something that had already been decided. "I'm leaving Friday," he said. I was standing in this kitchen, rinsing out a coffee mug. The water ran warm across my fingers. I turned the tap off and asked, "For how long?" "Just the weekend." I nodded once. "Okay." That made him look at me. Not for long, just long enough to register that something about my answer was missing. He was waiting for more. A follow-up question. A challenge. Maybe annoyance. Maybe even jealousy. Something to prove I was still standing in the same place I had always stood. Ready to react. Ready to ask. Ready to be managed. But there was nothing else. And that was the first moment I felt it. The shift. Not in him. In me. Because for the first time, I stopped trying to understand his decisions and started focusing on mine. The next few days were quiet. Not tense. Not openly cold. Just different in a way that lived beneath the surface. I still moved through the apartment. I still folded laundry. I still answered when he spoke. I still put my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door and charged my phone on the same side of the bed. But internally, something had already separated. I didn't ask about the trip again. I didn't ask who he was going with. I didn't ask where he was staying. I didn't ask questions I already knew he believed I had no right to ask. Of course he noticed. "You're being quiet," he said one evening. I looked up from the counter. "Am I?" "Yes." I gave a small shrug. "Just thinking." "About what?" I held his gaze for the moment. Then I said, "Things." That answer was enough to end the conversation, but not enough to ease whatever flicker of discomfort moved across his face. He wasn't used to my silence when he expected emotion. He was used to having the stronger position. He was used to me caring in a way that kept me exposed. Friday came. He packed casually, not like someone leaving something behind, but like someone stepping out of something temporary and returning to it unchanged. A duffel bag, 2 shirts folded without much care, toothbrush dropped in last. His phone charging on the edge of the dresser while he moved around the room like everything between us was settled and safe. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "I'll text you." I nodded. Okay. That was it. No goodbye kiss. No pause at the door. No softness suddenly appearing to repair what had cracked. Just gone. The apartment felt different after he left. Not empty. Clearer. That was the only word for it. The air felt lighter, like something heavy had finally stopped pretending to be normal. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long moment, listening to the quiet settle in around me. The lamp in the corner was still on. One of his coffee cups was still on the side table. His jacket was still hanging by the door. Every sign of him was still there. But for the first time, I looked at those things and didn't feel comfort. I felt clarity. That night, I didn't waste time wondering who he was with or why he felt so comfortable saying what he'd said in front of everyone. Those questions no longer mattered. What mattered was much simpler than that. He had already defined the relationship. I just hadn't responded to it yet. The first message came a few hours after he left. Made it? That was it. No detail, no context, no miss you, just confirmation. Like I was someone who needed to be updated, not someone who mattered. I looked at the message for a few seconds before replying. Okay. Short, neutral, unattached. If he noticed the difference, he didn't say anything. The second message came later that night. Place is nice, weather's good here. I could almost picture it. Him, somewhere relaxed, comfortable, moving through a space that didn't include me, without hesitation. I typed back, "Sounds good." And that was the rhythm of the weekend. He sent casual updates. I responded with the same calm distance. No questions, no curiosity, no emotional investment. From the outside, it probably looked normal. But it wasn't, because what changed wasn't the conversation. It was the intention behind it. I wasn't replying because I cared. I was replying because I had already stopped. The apartment stayed quiet. Not heavy, not lonely. Just still. I cleaned more than usual that weekend. Not obsessively, not dramatically. Just small things. Rearranging what didn't feel right anymore. Throwing out things we didn't need. Folding clothes that had been left untouched for too long. At one point, I opened the closet and paused. Half of it was his. Or at least, it used to be. I stood there for a long moment, looking at shirts I had washed, jackets I had hung, things I had made space for without ever questioning if that space was mutual. And for the first time, I did. The realization didn't hit like anger. It didn't even feel like sadness. It felt precise, like something clicking into place, because the truth wasn't complicated. He didn't see this as shared, and if it wasn't shared, then it wasn't mine to protect anymore. That thought stayed with me the rest of the day. Not loud, not overwhelming, just steady. By Saturday night, I wasn't thinking about what he was doing anymore. I was thinking about what I was going to do. Not emotionally, not impulsively, just clearly. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. the soft glow of the screen reflecting against the dark window behind it. The city outside moved like it always did, distant, indifferent, unchanged. I opened the lease agreement, scrolled, read every line slowly. My name, only mine. That was the first confirmation. Then the payment history. Every month. Mine. Utilities. Mine. There was something grounding about seeing it written out in simple, undeniable facts. No interpretation. No emotion. Just truth. I leaned back slightly in the chair, exhaling slowly. Because now, this wasn't about how I felt anymore. It was about what was real. And what was real was simple. He had made it clear I didn't get a say in his life. Which meant he didn't get a place in mine. Sunday morning came quietly. No messages from him at first. And I didn't check. Not once. I made coffee, opened the windows, let fresh air move through the apartment like something new was already settling in. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Heading back later. I read it, set the phone down, didn't respond. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I owed him anything. Not an answer, not an explanation, not even acknowledgement. Because whatever existed between us before had already ended. He just didn't know it yet. That afternoon, I made a call. Simple, direct. Hi, I need to have the locks changed. There was a pause on the other end. Today? Yes. Is everything okay? I looked around the apartment, at the space I had built. Maintained. Protected. And then I said, yes, it will be. The locksmith arrived within the hour. He worked quietly, efficiently, metal against metal, small mechanical clicks, the sound of something being replaced without resistance. I stood nearby, arms loosely crossed, watching without really watching. Not anxious, not uncertain, just present. When he finished, he handed me the new keys. Only set, he said. I nodded. Thank you. After he left, I stood by the door for a moment. The new lock looked exactly like the old one. Same shape, same color, same place. But it meant something completely different now. I turned the key once. Smooth, certain, final. That evening, the apartment felt even quieter. Not because something was missing, but because something unnecessary was gone. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed again. On my way. I saw the message. And for a moment, I just looked at it. Not with hesitation. Not with doubt. Just with the awareness that everything had already been decided. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. About an hour later, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Then the familiar sound of a key sliding into the lock. A pause. Then another attempt. Slightly harder this time. The lock didn't turn. I stayed where I was, sitting in the living room, listening. Because this moment wasn't about surprise. It was about clarity. The sound came again. Metal against metal. A little sharper this time. Then silence. Not the kind that fades quickly. The kind that lingers. Because something doesn't make sense yet. I could picture it without getting up. His hand on the key. The slight frown. That pause where your mind runs through simple explanations first. Wrong angle, wrong pressure. Maybe the lock's just stiff. Then the second attempt. A little more force. Still nothing. I stayed exactly where I was. Not frozen. Not nervous. Just still. Because this moment didn't need my reaction. It needed time. A few seconds passed. Then I heard it. The quiet exhale of confusion. Then footsteps shifting outside the door. And then a knock. Light at first. Naomi? His voice was controlled. Not concerned yet. Just puzzled. I didn't answer. Another knock. A little louder. Naomi, the key's not working. I let the silence sit between us. Not to punish him. Not to create tension. But because for the first time, I wasn't rushing to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. There's a specific kind of realization that happens when something familiar suddenly stops working. It doesn't hit all at once. It builds, slowly, uncomfortably. And I could hear that happening right outside my door. Another pause. Then footsteps. And then another voice. Soft, curious, familiar. Mrs. Lang, the neighbor across the hall. Oh, she said casually. You're back. Yeah, he replied, a little distracted. My key's not working. There was a small pause. The kind where someone decides whether or not to say something. And then she did. He changed the locks on Friday. Silence. Not just outside. Everywhere. What? He said. The word came out sharp. Immediate. Like his mind rejected it before it could fully process. He had someone come in Friday afternoon, she continued. New locks, new keys. Thought you knew. Another pause. Longer this time. And I could hear it now. Not just confusion. Something underneath it. Disbelief. No, that's not... He stopped himself. Then knocked again. Harder. Naomi. My name sounded different now. Less certain. What is she talking about? I stood up slowly. Not rushed. Not emotional. Just ready. Each step toward the door felt steady. Grounded. Like I wasn't walking into a confrontation. I was walking into a conclusion. I reached for the handle, paused for just a second, then opened the door. He was standing there exactly how I expected. Bag still slung over his shoulder, one hand still holding the useless key. His expression caught somewhere between confusion and irritation. But the second he saw me, something shifted. "What is going on?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at him, not searching, not questioning, just seeing him clearly, for the first time without any need to interpret or excuse. Then I said calmly, "You said we're not married." He frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It means," I replied, my voice even, "you don't live here anymore." The words didn't land all at once. I could see that. It hit him in pieces. First confusion, then disbelief, then something sharper. "You're joking," he said. "I'm not." He looked past me, like maybe the apartment itself would contradict what I was saying. It didn't. "You changed the locks?" he asked. "Yes." "Without telling me?" There it was, that expectation, that assumption that I owed him communication, explanation, permission. I held his gaze. "Just like you made plans without telling me." That landed. I saw it. A small shift in his posture, a tightening in his jaw. "That's not the same thing?" "It is," I said. His expression hardened. "You don't get to lock me out of my own place because I went on a trip." I shook my head slightly. "It's not your place." That stopped him. Completely. "What?" "I'm the one on the lease," I said. "I'm the one paying for it." He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "That doesn't—" "You made it clear," I continued, calm, steady, "that we're not building anything shared." "That's not what I meant." "You meant exactly what you said." The hallway felt smaller now, quieter. Even Mrs. Lang had gone silent. Like the entire space understood this wasn't something that could be interrupted. There was a long pause, and for the first time since he walked up to that door, he didn't have an immediate response. "You're overreacting," he said finally. But the confidence wasn't there anymore. Not fully. "No," I said. "I'm responding." "To what?" he asked, frustration creeping in. "To clarity." That was the moment something in him cracked. Not visibly, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for him to realize this wasn't an argument. It was a decision. He stared at me like he was trying to find the version of me that would soften, the one who would explain more, the one who would hesitate, the one who would care enough to undo this. But that version wasn't there anymore. "So that's it?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry yet. It was something more unstable than that. Uncertain. "You're just ending everything like this?" I tilted my head slightly. Not dismissive. Just considering. Because the truth was I hadn't ended anything. Not really. I shook my head once. "No." He waited. Like there was more coming. Like I was about to backtrack. "I didn't end it," I said calmly. "You did." His brows pulled together immediately. "That's not—" "You ended it the moment you made it clear I don't have a place in your decisions." "That's not what I said," he snapped. "It is," I replied. My voice didn't rise, didn't shift, didn't react. "You just didn't think I'd agree with you." That landed harder than anything else I had said so far. Because now, he understood something he hadn't before. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't me reacting to being embarrassed at a table full of people. This was me, accepting what he had already defined. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked. Quieter this time. The frustration hadn't disappeared, but it had lost its shape. I glanced briefly at the bag still hanging off his shoulder, then back at him. "You already had plans." The silence after that was different. Not tense. Not sharp. Just final. He let out a short breath, like he was trying to reset the moment, trying to find a different angle. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I didn't respond, because there was nothing left to argue. He took a step closer to the door. Not aggressive, but testing. Like maybe proximity would change something. "Naomi," he said, more controlled now. "We live together." I held the door slightly firmer. "No," I said, "we used to." His jaw tightened. "You're seriously doing this over one comment?" I met his eyes. It wasn't one comment. That was the first time my voice carried weight, not emotion. Truth. It was a pattern, I continued. A quiet one, easy to ignore, until it wasn't. He shook his head quickly. "That's not fair." "It is," I said. "You just didn't think I was paying attention." That silence came back again. But this time, it stayed longer, because now there was nothing left for him to push against. No confusion to hide behind. No misunderstanding to correct. Just reality. "You could have talked to me," he said finally. There it was. The last attempt. The softest version of the argument. The one that tries to shift the outcome by reframing the process. I nodded once. "I did." "When?" "Every time you dismissed me." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away for a second, then back at me. "That's not the same as this." "No," I agreed. "It's not." Because this was the part where I stopped asking and started deciding. His shoulders dropped slightly. Not dramatically, Just enough. Enough to show that whatever control he thought he had walking up to this door was gone. "So what?" he said under his breath. "You're just done." I didn't hesitate. Yes. No explanation. No padding. No attempt to soften the word. Just the truth. And that's when it finally hit him. Not in pieces. All at once. Because up until now, there was still a part of him that believed this could be reversed. That if he said the right thing, if he pushed the right way, if he waited long enough, I would fold. But I didn't. And now he knew. "Wow," he said quietly. Not angry. Not loud. Just empty. He took a step back. Then another. Like the space between us had finally become real. Like he was seeing the door not as something temporary, but as something closed. He adjusted the strap of his bag on his shoulder. Looked at me one more time. Like he was still searching for something. Anything. A crack. A hesitation. A reason to stay. There wasn't one. Eventually, he nodded slightly. Not agreement. Not acceptance. Just acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked away. No slammed door. No raised voice. No final attempt to argue. Just footsteps fading down the hallway. And this time, he didn't come back. I stood there for a moment longer, hand still resting lightly on the door, listening to the silence settle. Not heavy. Not empty. Just complete. Then I closed it, slowly, softly, and locked it. The apartment was quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel like something had just ended. It felt like something had already been over for a while, and I had finally caught up to it. I stood there for a moment after locking the door, my hand still resting on the handle. Not shaking, not second-guessing, just still. There's a difference between making a decision and accepting one. And what I felt in that moment wasn't the weight of what I had done. It was the absence of doubt. I walked back into the living room slowly. Everything looked the same. The same couch, the same coffee table, the same soft light from the lamp in the corner. But the space felt different. Not because something was missing, because something no longer belonged there. I sat down, exhaled, and for the first time in a long time, my thoughts were quiet. No replaying conversations. No trying to reinterpret tone. No wondering if I had overreacted. Just clarity. That night, I didn't check my phone. Not once. I didn't wonder where he went. Didn't wonder if he was trying to call. Didn't imagine what he was thinking. Because whatever version of that mattered before didn't matter anymore. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I had to, because I could. Sunlight filtered through the window, soft and steady. I made coffee, opened the windows. Let the air move through the apartment like it belonged there again. There's something strange about reclaiming a space you never realized you had slowly given away. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels natural, like returning to something that was always supposed to be yours. Over the next few days, I moved through things quietly, not aggressively, not like I was trying to erase him, just intentionally. I packed what was left of his things into boxes, folded neatly, organized, not out of kindness, out of closure. I didn't rush it, didn't drag it out either. Each item felt less like a memory and more like confirmation that what we had built together had never really been shared the way I thought it was. By the third day, everything that belonged to him was stacked neatly by the door, not as a message, not as a statement, just ready, in case he ever decided to come back for it. But he didn't, not immediately, not directly. Instead, the messages came from other people. "Hey, Mason said he's been trying to reach you. I think there's been a misunderstanding. He just wants to talk." I read them, didn't respond, because there was nothing left to clarify, no confusion to resolve, no version of the story that needed adjusting. There's a moment in situations like this where people expect you to explain yourself, to justify your decision, to make it easier for everyone else to accept what happened. But I didn't, because I wasn't responsible for making this easier to understand. I was responsible for not ignoring what was already clear. A week passed, then another. The apartment settled into a new rhythm. Not louder, not busier, just mine. I changed small things, moved the furniture slightly, replaced the sheets, bought a plant I didn't have to consider anyone else's opinion on. Little things. But they mattered, because for the first time, every decision in that space belonged to me. And there was something quietly powerful about that. About 2 weeks later, one of our mutual friends called. Not texted, called, which already told me this wasn't casual. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Hey," she said carefully. "Hey." There was a pause. Then, he didn't expect this. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. "I know," I said. Another pause. "He said you didn't even give him a chance to explain." I leaned back slightly against the couch. I didn't need one. Silence. Then softer. "He feels like you shut him out." I looked around the apartment, at the quiet, at the space that finally felt aligned with what was real. "I didn't shut him out," I said calmly. "He stepped out." That ended the conversation. Not abruptly, just naturally, because there wasn't anything else to add. By the end of the month, his name stopped coming up. The messages stopped. The curiosity from other people faded. And everything that had once felt complicated became simple. Not easy, but clear. And clarity is enough. 2 months later, everything felt lighter. Not because something new had replaced what was there, but because something unnecessary was gone. The apartment didn't feel different anymore. It felt right, like it had finally settled into the version it was always supposed to be. Mine. The mornings were quieter now, not empty, just uninterrupted. No second-guessing what I said the night before. No replaying conversations. No adjusting myself to avoid tension that never should have existed in the first place. Just routine. Simple. Clear. I moved through my days without that constant background noise, the one that makes you question your place in someone else's life. And the silence? It didn't feel like something missing. It felt like something resolved. I heard about him a few times. Not directly. Through people we both knew. Casual mentions. He's been asking about you. I think he wants to talk. He said things got out of hand. I listened, nodded, moved on, because there was nothing left to revisit. No version of that conversation that would change anything. No explanation that would undo what had already been made clear. There's a moment in every situation like this where the other person realizes the door isn't just closed. It's no longer theirs to knock on. And from what I heard, he reached that moment slowly. At first, confusion, then frustration, then the need to explain, to reframe, to make it seem like something temporary instead of something final. But clarity doesn't work like that. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. One afternoon, I found one of his old messages buried in my phone. Made it, place is nice. I stared at it for a second, not emotionally, just observing, because that message used to mean something. It used to represent connection. Now, it was just evidence of how little space I had actually occupied in his decisions. I locked my phone, set it down, and let it go. That was the difference. Before, I would have analyzed it, replayed it, tried to understand what he meant, what he didn't say, what I should have asked. Now, there was nothing to analyze, because the meaning had already been clear. I just hadn't accepted it yet. The last time I heard about him, it was quieter, less urgent. He's seeing someone new. I nodded. Okay. And that was it. No reaction, no comparison, no sense of loss. Because whatever we had wasn't something I wanted back. Not in that form, not with that dynamic, not with that version of myself. That's the part people don't always understand. They think walking away is about the other person, about what they did, what they said, what they lost. But it's not. It's about what you finally stop accepting, about recognizing the version of yourself you became just to keep something going, and deciding you don't want to be her anymore. I stood by the window later that evening, the city moving outside, lights shifting, people passing, everything continuing exactly as it always does. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely still inside. Not stuck, not waiting, just steady. Because once someone shows you exactly where you stand in their life, the only thing left to decide is where they stand in yours. And the truth is simple. If someone tells you that you don't get a say, believe them, then act accordingly.